In Skyrim, there are a total of 72 followers to choose from. Compared to many other games, that's a massive amount, and Skyrim's modding community has added hundreds more. However, today I'm going to be revealing to you which follower I believe is best in the vanilla game. Clearly, I can't individually go through 70 plus followers in one video. That would take me hours. So what I'm going to do instead is go through a narrowed down list of my favourites and compare them to each other. But before we begin, we need to define what makes a good follower. Power is clearly a desirable attribute. Be it in the form of magic or brute strength, it's undeniable that most Skyrim players' chief deciding factor is power. But a backstory is also important. Players want followers who make interesting comments and talk to them throughout the game. Perhaps a less important factor is also how easy the follower is to get. For some, you merely have to cough up some gold, whereas for others, you might have to complete a whole questline. Aesthetics are also important. Be you male or female, any Skyrim player wants to find a follower they find easy on the eyes. Let's begin with some of Skyrim's weaker contenders. Servo, the self-proclaimed best swordsman in all Morrowind, fares well against the other contenders in terms of power. His one-handed and destruction skills are very high, but he's also moderately good at conjuring as well. His typical fighting style is that he'll summon an Atronach, then switch to the Firebolt spell whilst closing in on his opponent before finishing them off with his sword. Teldrin is probably the most interesting of the followers in this bottom tier. He has a brief background story that he's willing to tell the player. He explains that he used to work for a Nord berserker who had an insatiable bloodlust and was extremely stubborn. However, he refused to work for him any longer after this Nord ran headfirst into what he describes as the largest bandit camp he'd ever seen. Teldrin also tells the player that he comes from Blacklight in Morrowind, but has spent most of his time in Solstheim and Skyrim. Teldrin Servo compares favourably to Mercurio in terms of both how interesting he is and how good he looks with his chitin armour, but Mercurio does seem to be more powerful. But what's the point of all that power if Mercurio's just bland? He has no backstory and his conversations are just generic. But if you value power above all else, then don't think twice before hiring Mercurio. His sole reliance on destruction magic means he eviscerates most of his enemies with ease. J'zargo is also another powerful mage follower. Although he doesn't have as many spells as Mercurio, he is still highly powerful, especially because he has no level cap, and he has the highest amount of health among all followers in the game. In terms of how interesting he is, I'd say he's better than Mercurio, but unequal with Teldrin Servo. He has a bit of a backstory as a unique Khajiit, eager to learn magic, but other than that, you can't talk extensively about his background. He's also the hardest of these three followers to acquire, whereas you can just hire the other two. You can only get J'zargo as your follower through completing his quest in the College of Winterhold. So among these bottom three contenders on my best followers list, I'd say Teldrin Servo is the best. Now to move on to the middling contenders for best follower. Aranda is quite powerful. He's a mage who often wields a mace, and unlike some followers, he's especially useful because if the player gets into a fight with the guards, he'll fight the guards for you. But where Aranda really shines is in terms of how interesting he is. He's obviously associated with Fermina's Daedric quest, and throughout the quest you'll learn about his background. He was once a Daedric priest called Casimir from Morrowind, but who became a healer devoted to Mara after his temple was filled with miasma and basically destroyed by orcs. There are also other interesting tidbits about his character, such as that he was once a member of the Bard's College. However, Aranda is probably the ugliest looking follower on this list. He's an aged, ragged Dunmer who wears some fairly typical robes. However, I would argue that he's more interesting than Ayla the Huntress. Although Ayla the Huntress is obviously very good looking and consequently a popular choice among Skyrim players, I honestly find her quite bland. She's simply a bloodthirsty woman who happens to be a werewolf. Apart from that, she has little backstory and she isn't that interesting. But she is, however, undeniably powerful. Her forte lies with bows and one-handed weapons, but other strong points of hers include light armor and block. But above both Aranda and Ayla in this middling tier is Freya, a follower from the Dragonborn DLC. In terms of power, she's probably more powerful than Aranda and Ayla given her hybrid use of magic and melee. She knows some high level spells such as Ebony Flesh, but at the same time has a highly leveled one-handed ability that makes her a formidable all-round warrior, even if she isn't that powerful when it comes to range. But where she excels as a follower is in terms of how intriguing she is. She staunchly believes in the Allmaker and in Solstheim, and is actually reluctant to become your follower. You have to pass a persuasion check to convince her to leave the Skarl village. She often tells the player about her life as a young woman being trained to fight by the old chieftain and her experience as a disciple of Storn Cragstrider. Safe to say, you won't be bored walking around Skyrim or Solstheim with Freya. She has lots of unique, interesting comments. Plus, there's the fact that she is pretty good looking as well. But above all other followers, there are two that I think contend for the title of best follower. Cerana is an obvious choice. Not only is she highly interesting with a long, dark history that she's willing to reveal to the player, she's both pretty and deadly. Her vampirism grants her unique powers, such as drain vitality and necromancy spells, that render her a cut above the rest of the mages. But more than that, there's the fact that she's an essential NPC. This renders her an invaluable asset in a fight because she simply can't die. But she's unique as a follower because there aren't many followers you can really interact with beyond telling them to fetch something or to wait. But with Cerana, if you choose the right dialogue options, you can convince her to cure her vampirism. It's the little things such as that and the fact she has a unique voice actor that render Cerana a favourite follower for most Skyrim players. But contesting her place as the best follower is surprisingly Cicero. Cicero is just plain funny. As a follower, he has an appeal because of how insane he is. He makes jokes and humorous observations whilst you roam around Skyrim. For instance, if you murder someone in front of him, he'll say, "It's like watching an artist create a masterpiece." And if you pickpocket someone, he'll ask that you pickpocket him some cheese. But perhaps the best thing about Cicero is that he will randomly dance. But more than just having some humorous dialogue and pretty good moves, Cicero is truly interesting because of his provenance. You can find his journals in the game, and they allude to his life. Apparently, he decided to wear jester's clothes after assassinating a jester whose laugh Cicero never forgot. In terms of power, Cicero also holds up pretty well. Both Cicero and Cerana scale with the player but are capped at level 50, and both are also essential and thus unkillable. Cicero is probably the weaker of the two, however, due to his inability to use magic and his reliance on melee weapons. But if you put a melee weapon in his hand, then he is extremely deadly. So who is the best follower? Well, that's a highly subjective question, but purely because I find Cicero funny, I'd say that he's the best follower in Skyrim for me. I know many will disagree, and I know that many will think there were excellent followers I didn't include in this video. For instance, I was inclined to include Lucien Lachance on this list, but he's not really a normal follower. You have to summon him every day, and he isn't actually classed as a follower in the game. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. Please do let me know if you want me to do a follow-up video to this where I go through the worst followers in Skyrim. I'm not sure if that's something people are interested in or not, but please let me know. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank my patrons. They really do help me out. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.